Welcome to the Archetypal Mosaic. This is Mikhail Tank. Today, during this upheaval of a time during lockdowns and the coronavirus, I'm here to have a great chat with depth psychologist, Jungian, and writer, and my friend, Ann Bencivengo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mikhail. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight.
Ann is also a very talented astrologer, by the way, and she can tell you where to find her on the internet in a bit. Today we're going to discuss something that sounds a little bit dark, maybe a lot dark, but it's a necessary conversation, and it will be a show on the death complex. Now, we know that death has been around ever since life began, but the death complex is a great concept that you wrote about and came up with in a paper which I read and loved. Let's start with your definition, your vision of what is a death complex.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. For the definition, I would say that we all hear the saying, oh, she must have a complex, or, oh, boy, that really upset him or her. He must have a complex. So anyways, the complex is something that is often brought on with a reaction to something that is very disturbing within the psyche. Sometimes it's conscious and people are aware of it, but it's often driven by unconscious material, things that we're not always recognizing that are feeding the thing that bothers us, or what we would call the complex. It's like a complex cluster of information that our brain, mind, psyche, feelings are reacting to.
Beautiful. And I know that you've quoted Carl Jung in the paper, which I adore, and I'm just going to read to you, the audience, a quote by Jung, which you chose, which is a great quote. The existence of complexes throws serious doubt on the naive assumption of the unity of consciousness. Every constellation of a complex postulates a disturbed state of consciousness. The unity of consciousness is disrupted, and the intentions of the will are impeded or made impossible. The complex must therefore be a psychic factor which, in terms of energy, possesses a value that sometimes exceeds that of our conscious intentions. Otherwise, such disruptions of the conscious order would not be possible at all. And in fact, an active complex puts us momentarily under a state of duress, of compulsive thinking and acting, for which, under certain conditions, the only appropriate term would be the judicial concept of diminished responsibility. Let's discuss death. How do you feel about death? And then I'll share how I feel about it.
Oh, okay. Yes, well, how I feel about death is that I have mentioned that in the paper itself that I have had a bit of a death complex, where perhaps that's something that a lot of us are dealing with to some extent, various extents right now, that we're faced with the possibility of our own mortality, or else we're thinking about it more at this time. And there was a time in my life where a lot of my family members and relatives had died, and it just seemed like it was what I called the decade of death. And death was all around me, and I don't want to say that it was a complete diminished responsibility, but it did often thwart me from my best intentions, because I was feeling rather dragged down by the death, the seriousness and the heaviness of all the death around me, and it was very much on my mind constantly, or even under consciousness, maybe not even constantly conscious, but it had an effect on me where I wasn't always as happy as I could be. And of course, we expect to mourn a time, for a time. But this was such a prolonged period of a lot of people passing on. And so as far as death goes, I've always had this fascination with it because of being not only a Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto, which is in the Greek underworld and Lord of Death, but it also, Scorpio rules the 8th house in the zodiac. So I've always had this natural sort of fascination and, I don't want to say connection to death, but I would say that that is part of the way that I feel about death, is it is a part of life. It's a mysterious part of life that most of us wish we could understand while we're alive. And when I did have all those people die in my family, it did bring me closer to the feeling of my own mortality. I was realizing that when the older people in your family die, you're kind of like feeling like you're standing next in line. So they know you are the elder, or you are, so it had a feeling of, not fear, but a feeling of being, searching and feeling a little bit nervous about it at times, but then you try to acquiesce. I mean, that's all we can do, I suppose. I could go on about my feelings about death for a really long time, but I'm trying to summarize it here for you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that you state what you want to say. In Russian, there's a wise saying that says that when you lose one of your parents, you're half a person. When you lose both, you're a full person. I don't know what that means, and I don't want to know what that means. But I know at some point I probably will find out. In terms of death, right now we're facing the coronavirus spread. I've been under lockdown in Northern California for about 4 days. Southern California just went into lockdown. New York went into lockdown today. And we're all facing this situation that even the elders in the community, I was in a long line of trying to buy some farmer's cheese, and there was an elderly lady there in her 80s, and she said that even during the war she never experienced anything like this. Several people have said that, and it's very strange that we're all experiencing something because we're fearing death, because the coronavirus is affecting a certain amount of the population from the age of 30 up until the elderly, and a percentage between 20 to 30%, I don't know exactly, are suffering very quick, what they call double pneumonia, when they feel like when they're breathing in, it feels like breathing glass. And so this fear of death and dying and having your elders die so quickly because of it is what we're in right now. And it's a very strange time because being affected by it as well, in terms of sitting at home and talking to people who have cabin fever, death is very much real in the world right now, and death feels like a very cruel thing because it comes upon people without their wishes or intentions usually, and it just takes everything away. At the same time, we all know that we've heard people say, and we assume that once one dies, there is peace of some sort, either intermediate peace or prolonged peace. And a lot of people kind of, without hurrying, look forward to that peace because it's a sense of solace. I'm just wondering, because you also do tarot, what does the death card mean, and how do you feel about the soulless, not the soullessness, but the solace, like the peacefulness of death?
That's a really interesting question to bring the death card into it. The death card looks to most people like this fearsome force just coming in just sweeps them away, and they think of it as something very violent. And of course, some deaths are violent and painful. Other deaths are very peaceful, and we go, hopefully, when we feel it's our time. So we're at peace, hopefully, at the time that we die. So the death card can also mean not only just physical death, which it usually doesn't mean that in the deck, but excuse me, it can mean a transition, a resurrection, a change, because we have numerous deaths within our life. Every time we sleep, it's considered sort of a mini death. We're in a more unconscious type of state, in the dream world, another type of existence. We have the death of a phase in life when we suddenly become an adult and all of a sudden we're not at home anymore as children or teens, or then we have a midlife and we're letting go of our youth and trying to become, a lot of people try to become more serious about their life at that time. They kind of go over their lives and look back and see if they're on the right path, and a lot of people change careers and things at that time in their life. And sometimes just throwing out an old pair of shoes can remind us that, oh my gosh, I wore these shoes for years. I ran them along the beach for the last decade of my life, and then you're throwing those old beat up shoes out. And so we're letting go of something. And that could be almost like a complex where there's so many things clustered within that image of those pair of shoes that there's all these different experiences that are associated with it that bring a response. So I think that death can be peaceful for people. I think it depends on one's faith. If you have faith in the afterworld, that it will be a place of peace or a state of peace, then I guess more people would feel a sense of being more comfortable with the idea of death. Of course, we have that, yea, though I walk through the shadow in the valley of death, I fear no evil, I fear nothing. So we have that statement of determination when we go forth into death. For some people.
My experience with death was losing the lady who I loved the most, and she took care of me since I was a baby. And the thing is that after that happened, I was okay, and then everything just kind of broke. I broke into pieces, and I couldn't sleep for a month because psychosomatically I was burned from the inside out. I created a project called My New Axis, which allowed me to kind of restructure my life into another place in my mind in order to, not necessarily to disassociate, but to create a distance in order to find myself, because I was so attached emotionally and with my heart. I know that there's many people out there in some cultures, which I actually like a lot, who have a much easier way of dealing with death. For some would be colder, for some would be smarter. It depends on how you look at it. I'm just not one of those people who can let go of something that I care about immediately just because I feel like it. Unless somebody was really rude to me, then I can. But that's a different kind of death. And, now that I shared that, I know that in the paper and between our conversations, you have experienced near death. What was that like, and what was it like to come back here?
For prior to having a near-death experience, I felt like something was wrong. I couldn't quite pinpoint it. I just didn't feel quite right within myself. And it wasn't any violent, sudden accident or anything like that. I just slipped off into a coma. And prior to that time, I felt physically unwell. Something was off. And I also felt like spiritually unwell. So whether it was something along the lines of what shaman Sandra Ingerman would call soul loss, as many shaman or shaman practitioners before her in the tradition of shamanism would think of soul loss as something that can be rectified through soul retrieval, where you can bring back parts of the soul that have escaped from you or darted off or that are missing. I did feel that I experienced some soul loss at that time in my life through going off a branch from my main path, and I took a wrong turn, and I think for a while I just wasn't on the right path, and it wasn't good for me. I was going off in the wrong direction. I mean, once it all culminates and the whole situation is over, you can always say, oh, well, that going off the path for a while and off on the side road for a while was part of I took the scenic road. That was part of my journey, and everything's fine now, and that is true too. However, at the time, I suppose if I weren't on that wrong path, something else would have happened. So either way, it's my journey. So I did go into a coma just kind of suddenly. I didn't feel well one night, and so I drove over to my mother's, and I said, Mom, do you mind if I just sleep here tonight? And as soon as I sat down on the couch, I just kind of flopped over into a coma, and I drove myself over to her house, and I was life-flighted, and I don't remember that part of it. I feel as though, in my own case, since I think I checked out because I kind of had to take a look at my life. So I'm thinking of that as sort of a metaphor, as you were mentioning to me recently about metaphors for the death and what I guess how it applies to everything we're going through now. We're in a time of limbo, and I felt like that's what I was in. I was reviewing my life, I feel, while I was out in this coma, because it was almost like a movie of what I had done in my life and making decisions and where I had to go next. And I indeed did come back out of it. I did resurrect, just like they say, the scarab beetle or the phoenix, and I felt very calm. I came out of it as almost as if nothing had happened. I sat up in bed. The doctors were worried that I would need somebody to remind me how to count change or how to turn on a washer and a dryer, but none of that happened. I was just exactly the way I was. So life proceeded as normal. I just snapped out of it, and but whatever I had experienced while I was out, I had this incredible sense of peace when I came back that I didn't have prior to that. Everything was going to be okay. It was very much like the Tao, living in the Tao, or living in a Zen moment. Every moment was like Zen, where each moment was perfect in and of itself. Now, I have to say that after a number of years, some of that has worn off a bit, and I have to strive more for that or practice it a little more, be more mindful. At the time, it just came natural.
So in a way, you're kind of wanting to become unconscious in a way all the time. But let me ask you, how long did your period of unconsciousness last at that point? And do you remember anything from the time you were unconscious during that time?
The only thing I really remember was being lost in like a nothingness. And I don't feel that is probably what death is for everybody, because I have had some paranormal experiences concerning other people that have said things to me about the time when I was out, and one happened to be my daughter, which would be very unlikely unless something was really up with that, because she was only barely 3 years old at the time when she was talking to me about how she found me when I was in a coma, and that she looked down at me and was floating around up there waiting to be born. And she said, I looked down at you and just knew you had to be my mommy. So there's a longer story to that. But I was out for a couple of weeks, and while I felt like I was in limbo, there was just stillness. And I think that I was in such a deep state of meditation to review my life and to see where it was going, that for me, I wasn't going up to the so-called light that everybody sees yet, or passing on into the next dimension, I don't feel that would be any evidence for me that there is not another dimension or place or a heavenly place where we go, because of what my daughter said to me, that she was floating around up there waiting to be born. Mommy, before I was born, and then she said that she looked down on me, and she said, I looked down at you and I saw your dead eyes, and I took you up to God's house, and we had a funeral over you so that you could be my mommy, because I just knew you had to be my mommy. And what 3-year-old says that? So that's why I totally believe that there are other places of being.
Beautiful. Interesting. What I recently read is the fact that in Italy right now, at this time of the recording of this show, as we know, the hospitals are so full, and the people who are suffering the severe pneumonia-like symptoms of the feeling like they're suffocating and it feels like glass every time they breathe in, it lasts, as far as I know, for about 5 to 7 days. And if they're strong enough and healthy enough to get through it, then things get better. And if they are not, then they pass on. This kind of a tremendous kind of suffering, where somebody said their pain was a 15 on a scale of 10. It's unbelievable that human beings are being tortured like this right now in such kind of invisible ways all over the world. And the fear of death is really the cause of all of this lockdown and stuff, which of course makes perfect sense. However, Marianne, it's interesting that we're speaking about, the fear, the pain, the unconscious element, and perhaps also the freeing element. There are so many kind of passages and chapters in the Book of Death, and I'm not sure that any human being is conscious of all the chapters. I do know that since both you and I are very spiritual people, and I do sometimes experience things that are overwhelming, and I know that you do as well. I remember when I was at the gravesite, kind of doing a prayer of full transmission into complete whatever levels there are up there, so that there isn't anything left in between, so somebody that I love can fully let go. And I soulfully requested it just from the inside out. I know that I could see a very powerful image of the movement, and there have been times when I have felt both people and ghosts. I know that sounds peculiar to some people, but I have been in locations which are haunted, and I have experienced ghosts who basically told me to get the hell away from the location or them, because they were never going to let go, never going to transcend and transmit themselves. I've kind of experienced a lot of these levels and layers, and sometimes when I sleep, I can go to that land because I have communication, and I sit down and have conversations with people that I love who are not here in this world anymore. There's all of these elements, and they're all death, in different phases of death. What do you think is the best way of death? Like, if you could write your own death, like if I could write my own death, I would do it at a day when I feel like dying, and I would just kind of like walk into the sea and then disappear and appear in a big table with the people I love up there, and I would perform for them and tell them about my life and listen to all of their secrets and mysteries. That would kind of be my secret, perfect death. Not anytime soon, but of course, I can't make that decision, but that would be a nice kind of like romantic kind of death, what would be yours?
When I was in my 20s, I actually had a dream in which I saw myself die as a very elderly woman. So I feel like I have a long way to go from where I am now. It was very comforting to see that I wasn't going to die until I was very, very old. And I did die of pneumonia, but I was well into my 90s. And I saw myself laying in this bed, and it was a very beautiful room, very beautiful bed, kind of a beautiful farmhouse type look. I saw my soul go up. I saw myself take my last breath quite peacefully, and saw my soul lift up out of my body and kind of float out through the window over this beautiful golden field with trees and the meadow in the background and going up into the air. And I just haven't really had that much of a fear of it since then. And I felt like it was a gift I was given to see that, because knowing that I was later on having near-death experience, not just that one time, but more than that one time, because I feel that something was really challenging me, or else challenging me to learn about something that I had to bring back. So in any case, it was just so relaxing or comforting to know that I didn't have to worry that I was going to die young of these, problems or whatever I had, slipping off into a coma or whatever. So, but my most peaceful thing, I think, would be just that, just the way I saw it. I dreamt of my most peaceful death, which was always my fear of death, was, oh my gosh, what do I have to go through in order to die? It wasn't really so much just the death itself, but it's like how? What's going to happen? Am I going to feel pain? Am I going to suffer? You see people die these painful deaths, and I have. So I think that's another part of the death complex, is that even when I was young, I saw some people in my life die very slow, painful deaths, and so that was good. My ideal would be to be at peace and to be satisfied with my life's work, to know that I had completed hopefully most of what I wanted to, or even perhaps had come here for in the first place. So, and I hope there's music. I want to hear I want to hear my favorite songs when I pass over. I just, one of the things that would make me most sad would be to lose the music that I love, and I hope that all my loved ones, of course.
What music would it be? What would be the song?
Well, some of my favorite, most heavenly songs to me that I want to hear in heaven would be While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and I would love to hear Fauré, Pellias Melisande, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful medley of songs. I would love to hear Beethoven and my favorite Chopin nocturnes, and especially nocturne in C sharp minor. I forget which one it is exactly, but I think it's C sharp minor, and the preludes, Chopin's preludes, are among my favorites. I couldn't really pick any specifically, though, because I just love all my old classical music as well as so much of the rock and roll. And
that's some great choices. I love I love Chopin too. I heard some piano versions at the Met. Was it not the Met, or was it the one of the nice places in New York a while back. Anyway, my preferred songs would be Lavanda by Rotaro и Yola, Я тебя отвоюю, Родина снегу by Allegro, and Do You Think of Me by Mariah Carey. Those four songs I really would love to hear at that time. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. There are people who are indeed suffering, maybe even tremendously. What can we advise them at this time? What can we wish them? Because, we're talking about now the way we want to die, but the people who are dying the way they don't want to die, what can we say to them? You start and I'll finish.
One thing I would say would be that right now what we're doing here in talking about death is acknowledging it. And it's not something we want to go around, oppressed by and depressed by every day of our lives, but it is good time to sort of check in. And right now, with us all being sort of in this waiting period of this limbo or this cocoon and waiting to be hopefully reborn back into grace, a graceful life, if you think about these things, it's okay. It's not that you're morbid. We're all human. We all know that death is inevitable at one point of time or another. And it's one of the big human mysteries that it's okay to think about it. It's okay to talk about it. It's probably not many people's most popular topic for discussion. A lot of people would rather save this discussion perhaps for Halloween with ghosts and crossing over and scary things, but I would say that in some ways it's a great solvent. It's not just the interruption of life, but I mean there have been some philosophers and psychologists who have said that actually it's the great work, that's the end of our life, and it's the culmination, and that's kind of what, not to say that we were all born to die, that sounds so kind of morbid also, but that just to know that kind of we do have to acquiesce to it to some extent and find our peace with it. That doesn't mean that we have to right now say, oh, okay, well, you know, if I die, I die with this corona. But I have heard some people say that. Like, well, if it's my time, it's my time. Because people are really, really scared. So, I mean, what do you feel about that? Do you think that it helps people to talk about their fears right now?
I know that it's a fantastic thing. You know, it's easy to feel upset about fears, but to get through them is what I've always done, you know, with my art. So to me, it just keeps you moving. And my response to people who are suffering is to know that the suffering shall pass, and that when the peace does come, one can look at their life from the other angle and find the elements, the pearls, which made you feel good. And I know that everyone has had a few of those at least. I have thankfully had a tremendous amount of pearls. And I certainly hope and wish to have many more. I'd like to read a poem I wrote like maybe an hour ago. It's a song. It's called Cabin Fever Baby, because that's what a lot of us are going through. And a lot of my friends that I texted it to go, Mikhail, that's exactly how I feel. So I just want to read it. So, it's cabin fever, baby, shielding ourselves from invisible crown enemies, singing in showers, baking sweet goods. It's cabin fever, honey, stuck with a suitcase and some war food cans in the closet. Time to dance with the souls of things, write letters to the ones you love, maybe a song or two, clean all the dust from your room, autograph your own autobiography, visualize all the wonderful things that one day could be, and after this hideous mess we're in bats away, let's rejoice in life and begin again.
Wow, I love it.
Okay.
It's a great poem. It's very inspirational, and I love the imagery.
Thank you.
People just going about their lives, but it's cabin fever, honey. That's great. I love it.
Thank you. Marianne, what would you like to share? I want the audience to know how to reach you for astrology readings, tarot readings, and whatever else that you're really good at. And you are a very talented lady who writes really well, edits really well, thinks amazing thoughts, and does great astrology and tarot, among other things. So before you tell people how to contact you, what else would you like to share about this subject at this time?
I think that what I was talking about earlier, and we were both talking about this waiting for the light to come back, waiting for the grace to come back into life and enjoy it. That whole thing about being out for a while, and I was talking about limbo. it's like right now, a lot of us are looking back over our lives and sort of weighing the heart. You were mentioning in a recent conversation you and I had about some of the metaphors of death in Egyptian mythology. So I was thinking when you said that about the weighing of the soul, because how that applied to my being out for a while, but in another way, in a lesser way, I'm out right now. I'm stuck at home. I'm thinking about my life. We're all here within ourselves. We're having to go inward so much. And we're just, I don't want to say stuck with ourselves, but some people might feel that way. So what are we doing? Are we being more introspective? Are we thinking about the ways that we might want to improve? And coming together with others. Are we going to be, what I keep hearing on whatever talk show, whatever, are we going to be kinder and gentler or whatever to other people, to loved ones, to the world at large? Are we going to live joyfully and more peacefully? And I guess that's all that I would think in closing of what I would like to say. I think that's while we dug through a lot of the icky stuff here, the death of people still want to talk about perhaps some of it, it's all to come back out into the light and to be resurrected and reborn this spring equinox, the rebirth of nature of the world. So,
amen. And also, go ahead.
Oh, I think even if it wasn't meant for that purpose, that Corona emergence into our world, it might end up having that purpose of making us all be introspective and mindful about those things, and hopefully we come out of this more happily and joyfully and peacefully.
And I'd like to say that you did a great job. Thank you for being on the show. And also to say that what's important also are talismans, things that you can believe in. I know that some of my guests in the past have said, you just need yourself. And I believe that. I agree. However, I do like talismans because I can always, when they talk about charging a stone or charging a ring, you specifically put an intent, a time, a day, a stamp on it, and then you resurrect that thought. And you may have charged several things with different energies and intentions, and you can't necessarily always feel everything at the same time. And so a talisman is a beautiful thing, whether it's, turquoise or a symbol or a combination of those things or anything else. I certainly have my talismans, which I sometimes share on my social media at Mikhail Tank. You can definitely see many. I actually sell some of my used talismans on my eBay store. Check out my website, which is mikhailtank.com. You can also hire me for spiritual support and creative counseling. Marianne, how can people contact you, and what are your services?
I have a website also, and I do have the emails as on the website. But my website is mbenci.com, and it's just MBENCI. It's all lowercase. Don't have to worry about capitalizing anything, and it's just the initial of my first name and the half of my last name, mbenci.com. And you can reach me there for counseling also, and life coaching using astrology and tarot, other esoterics, as well as any other type of music. I do a lot of music as therapeutic, poetry is therapeutic, writing, and other arts and humanities, and basically mythopoetics, what would be poetic, soulful humanities of the arts.
Beautiful. Marianne, thank you for being on the Archetypal Mosaic, and thanks for being a great friend.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And I really, really enjoyed the things that you were also mentioning, which is a lot of food for thought. And I I really appreciate being here with you this evening and with anyone out there that's going to be listening. Thank you.
May the whole world find its strength and come back into life after this hideous virus has been nullified. Amen.
That's really, really wonderful. May the whole world be blessed.
Yes. Blessed be.
Blessed be.